Yo guys, Mess here with another Grand Archive video, and continuing the Meta Misinformation, I now have the second hero I want to discuss, and at the moment one of my favorites, Rye. So I'm going to look at 3 builds, so one Fire Arcane Rye, one just Fire Rye known as the Erupting Rye, and then the last one being a Wind Rye. I'll have links for all the lists in the description below, and I'll kind of just go over how they're played, matchups very briefly, what's your good matchup, what's your bad matchup, and if I think they're viable or not. We'll start off with my favorite, Arcane Fire Rye. So this one here was created and piloted by Jonsu at one of the Discord tournaments. He won with this list, so I thought this is a good list to discuss, and it's not super combo orientated, obviously it is, but it does have some removal in the list. So we'll start with the material deck. So obviously all these lists, all arcane ones are playing Rye Stormseer, where you get +1 for each arcane element. Spell card in Banishment, they kind of dictate your play style. Grand Crusader's Ring, the 2 tomes, Crystal of Empowerment, Mana Limiter, and Arcanist Prism. This is where you can change it up if you don't like these cards. Like a card I personally like is Storm Tyrant's Eye, and that's one I'd probably consider putting in the material deck. Orb of Regret, and then Safeguard Amulet. Another card you might want to consider too is maybe Nullifying Lantern, if you are running into people that are playing Rending or Erupting, which I'll show in a separate list. Main deck, so your main pieces here are your arcane cards. So 4 Arcane Blast, 4 Arcane Disposition, 4 Arcane Sights. This is vanilla across every Arcane Rye. And then where you see a bit of discrepancies is some lists play Erratic Bolt, some don't. Some tend to want to main board Anger the Skies, which is this card here in the material deck, and not play Erratic Bolt. Jonsu's list here, which is one with, is putting Erratic Bolt. Spell Shield Arcane, Reckless Conversion, a card you'd love to play, a card you hate being on the receiving end, and obviously a card obviously on the GA devs agenda, on a card potentially that might get banned in the future. So that's just how powerful this card is. It's essentially extending. It's a turn extender that leads to lethal. Couple power overwhelmings. Some people run 3, some people run 2. Play around with it. Ignite the Souls, pretty much in every arcane build. Great to discard off a Creative Shock. Great to hold in hand if you're versing another Rye and they're about to Spell Shield. You get the Spell Shield resolve, then you hit them with the Ignite the Soul, so they only get 1 counter for your big spells after that. This list is running Flame Rune Swordsman. I wouldn't say this is in every list, but it's good to help clear the board of other allies, and it's a threat to push damage. And if they do get it removed, well then obviously you've got Floating Memory. This sometimes just gets changed for cremation rituals, and you just up the count of library witches. Sparklight in this one, and then also Purging Flames. This is a board wipe. Some people opt to run, instead of Sparklight, Focus Flames. Now the difference being Focus Flame deals 1 extra damage, so it can clear most of Wind allies board, but it is slow. So you can see in this list Jonsu's opted for Spontaneous Combustion, which is a fast spell that deals 4 damage, but it costs 1 more. So it's a sideboard card he probably brings in for those Wind ally matches. Dungeon Guide, because leveling up quick in Rye is awesome, as it is in every hero. So this is running 4 Dungeon Guides, and 4 Careful Studies, staple in nearly all Rye decks. 4 Scry the Skies, 2 Deflecting Edges. Deflecting Edges very good into your aggro matches up, like Fire Xander. So Fire Xander Burn or aggro, ones that aren't playing Luxem, as a Rye player would be your worst matchup. So Deflecting Edge just reads as free life. Excellent card in that matchup. You can see there's an additional one in the sideboard, and some people keep them in the sideboard and bring them in, but this card is just excellent in those matchups. One notable exception that a lot of Rye players are playing is Prune to Mana. I'll show you in the win list that card. Rise, Arcane Rise, pretty much play all the same. You're trying to get arcane cards into your banishment, and you want to play cards that kind of net you a card back, so they replace themselves, like Scry the Skies, Creative Shock. So then that way you're losing cards to banishment, but you're holding your 7-card hand. And then when you do get to level 3 Rye, you do want to have, you know, at minimum 3 arcane cards in banishment. I usually try have 5 arcane cards in banishment, so that my careful study is free, and then really look to close out the game with obviously Arcane Blast and Fireballs. In terms of matchups, Luxem Xander is very easy. They can't put enough pressure before you pop off, and you can usually take a turn off, build up cards before you try kill them. Win Lorraine's, you are favored. They need to see a nice ally curve to be able to pressure you, unless they're playing like a full wind ally tribal, and in that case is, you know, your cards like your Sparklights, Purging Flames, Deflecting Edges, Spontaneous Combustions, and Anger the Skies are clutch. But I'd probably still say you are favored. It's a harder matchup, the human ally tribal. Fire Lorraine, if it's a Crux mid-range package, let's say you're favored. If it's a fire like aggro sort of one where they're playing Blazing Throws to try and rending fire momentums, it's a harder matchup, but still winnable. You just got to prioritize your cards like Deflecting Edge and whatnot. And then in those matchups too, don't be scared to throw a fireball to kill an ally. You have so many kill spells, and in those aggro decks they usually don't push to level 3, so they're usually only around the 20 health, so you don't need to do you don't need that many kill spells. And in this deck here you've got, you know, you're running 11, so don't be afraid to throw a fireball. And because they are fire, they can't prevent the damage of your non-action to your spells. One card that is in seeing a lot more play that isn't in this list is Varuk, which I'll show you in the erupting list. Really good card if they're playing Veilings or Spell Shields. It is niche, so like you don't need to run if you don't want to. I personally like it as a one-of, but I'm weird with my one-offs, so maybe not recommended for everyone. Last card I just want to note here is Barrier Servant. You see this in some lists and you don't. It's good to absorb some damage with the enlightenment counters, but a lot of lists probably aren't running this, so you can play around with that, and if you like it, include it. If you don't, do I think Rye is viable? Yes. It's probably one of the strongest lists at the moment, this Arcane Fire Rye. And if you are looking at store champs and regionals, I'll definitely be considering Arcane Rye, not only for myself but for others. The next list we'll look at is a Wind Rye. I grabbed this one off Andy's article on Luxera's map. So he wrote up an article about Rye. So actually I'll put that whole article in the description. He just goes through the his Fire Arcane Rye is very aggressive, but he also adds a Wind Rye list and a Water Rye list. This Wind one I think is very good as a starting point for a player that wants to try Wind Rye. You can see here in terms of material cards, the only real difference is you know, Storm Tyrant's Eye, Choking Fumes. It's a choice if you want to play that, if you don't. And Chalice of Blood, I love that card, especially when your opponent knows it. Sometimes it just buys you a bit of damage. Storm Tyrant's Eye, great card. Here you're running obviously the extra Erratic Bolt because you kind of have to. You don't have Fireball, so with Erratic Bolts and Arcane Blast are your win cons. The only arcane card here that isn't run that I would consider is Advent of the Stormcaller. So it's a 15 cost based on efficiency, where depending on what level you are, you reveal that number of cards. You can banish the arcane cards, and for each arcane card you can deal damage. That's just another way to push damage, and like a 1 or 2 of in this list is fine. This list with the dungeon guide and besiege, you essentially have 8 dungeon guides. So the concept of Windcaller is to turbo to level 3, and it can get to level 3 quicker than anyone else with those besieges. This list isn't running, but even if you run Zephyr, you can Zephyr a dungeon guide, and then when it bounces back in, it does the on enter. So like, there's a lot of ways for Wind to get to level 3, and then you use your careful studies, your pre-enter manners, channel on the winds to get enlightenment counters, use your power overwhelming to get to very high level, and like it's not uncommon to do an erratic bolt for 20. Card I really like, disorientating winds, return target ally to owner's hand, draw a card. Sometimes you'll do this on your own like dungeon guide, so now you're getting 2 cards back. You've gotten the effect out of dungeon guide, and now you've got it back in hand to play a different spell. This list is running Swift Recruit, probably just to absorb a little bit of early damage, but not needed. You can even you can run whatever you want. In terms of matchups here, this is good into, same as like your Fire Arcane, right? It's good into all matchups, and then in the mirrors or in the versing a Fire Arcane Rye, I think Fire Arcane Rye has the advantage just because they have fast spells where this list doesn't. So this list can't kill on your opponent's turn, so it does require some very good play, holding onto your spell shields and understanding the matchup and the cards coming. Not unwinnable, but I'd probably favor the Fire Arcane Rye. This into the aggro list, it is a hard matchup, but you do have Swift Recruits for this one, and then you have Veiling Breezes. Veiling Breezes are very big, especially into the aggro Fire Sanders, because they go wide and they do a lot of like 2 damages at a time. So getting a Veiling Breeze can just like shut off a lot of the damage in those turns. So probably slightly better into those aggro lists than the Fire Arcane Rye, but you are losing you're losing a Fireball essentially. The lists are pretty similar, but it's Fireball. So Fireball, the ability to play on fast, it's a great card. When I'm on Arcane Rye, Fire Rye, and I'm versing a Wind, sometimes I hold the Fireball for their turns when they pop off, and when I can say they can't spell shield at all, I'll then send the Fireballs for the win. When I played Wind Rye for the Fire Rye matchups, I actually included Juggle Knives just to use as like an Ignite the Soul. It works sometimes and it catches them off guard, but after like game 1, they kind of see it coming, and then they play around it. And because that at a 2 cost, so you need 3 cards to play, it's not ideal, but it's good for a surprise factor. The last list, one I haven't really played that much, but is definitely a interesting list, is Eruptingride. So I've actually grabbed this from one of the older tournaments. I was just looking for just to show the essence of what Eruptingride does, and I found this list from Super Mitch in the Discord. I know he plays a lot of Eruptingride just from seeing previous tournaments, and that's why I grabbed his list. Essentially, most of the time you only go to Rye at level 1. I know he has Rye Mana Weaver, but I think that's probably for niche circumstances. You're not really going past Rye at level 1. And what you're trying to do in this matchup is you are playing Ember Song, which is a melody. So you need a 9-card hand, so 3 cards, 2 cards in the Ember Song. You then play Erupting Rhapsody, which banishes fire cards from your graveyard, and you get a level for that. And then if you've played a melody, which Ember Song is, it deals damage, and then you finish up with a Fireball. And then, so on that 9-card hand, depending on how many cards you have in your graveyard, you could be level 10. So 10 damage off the Ember Song and 11 off the Fireball. I have been killed to an Eruptingride list on their turn 3. They went first, so I had 2 turns. The only defense against this list is like a Nullifying Lantern. but I leveled up on my card that I won't have it straight away, but they killed me. You do need to be concerned about the potential for this list. What they do, because like if people realize you're an eruptingride, they are going to play Nullifying Lantern. So what you do have Spurn to Ash, which destroys Nullifying Lantern. Only 12 in this list, which is fine because you have a lot of cycling. Cycling in the sense of cards like Cemetery Sentry. On enter, discard a fire card, adds to your graveyard, and then you draw a card. That's great. You also do to just cycle through cards and gain cards. You'll play a Library Witch, and then you'll play a Cremation Ritual. Gets a fire card into the graveyard, draws you another 3 cards. Increasing Danger gets a fire card into the graveyard and gets your card. Also gives a card to your opponent, but this deck is very much, it's a high risk sort of deck. It is fragile to obviously lanterns if you don't have Spurn to Ash. So if you get lantern and you can't find a Spurn to Ash, it's close to game over. So it doesn't, playing Increasing Danger, this mindset of this deck is I'm just going full throttle to try win. Hasty Messenger is obviously more cycle. Cards like Creative Shock, and then also comes the Apprentice, draws a card, is another card for a Cremation Ritual. You got a lot of attacks for Cremation Ritual, and because you're playing these small allies, they also ping damage and it adds up in the long run. And then this deck is playing Varuk, and because your Fireball and your Erupting Rhapsody makes them non-unpreventable damage, so other ride decks can't get around your Spell Shield, or they can't play Spell Shield, or Veiling doesn't work. And because this deck doesn't materialize a lot, like it'll get to level 1 or play Grand Crusader in it, and it does to get cards cheaper, it can afford not to get a card and just play Varuk, and not worry about materializing in the next turn, because it doesn't necessarily need to materialize. You're probably only going to Rye level 2 if you need that extra health and survive a turn. Otherwise, you're probably just trying to go for the win. Most of these games you'll probably win just on Rye level 1. So that's the Rye lists that I would consider for store champs and regionals. Personally, my favorite is Arcane Fire Rye. I've been having a fair bit of success on that at the moment, but you do need to worry about those aggro fire Xanders, because they can just kind of like clean you up. So if you have any questions about any of the lists, let me know on the Discord or in the comments below. Otherwise, that's it for today. Enjoy the video. Cheers.